Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Commission Workshop meeting for Tuesday, June 16th, 2026. And once I see who's here, rather than the bamboo. So James and Nelson are here? Okay, great. We have James Harris and Nelson DeLeon online. Commissioner Peter Rye is here with me in council chambers, and I am Wayne Beeler. I am the chairman of the Planning Commission. Okay, I always have questions about this now. Do I actually call for a motion for acceptance of the? Okay, so as long as we agree on the agenda as presented, we'll move forward. Is there anyone here for public comment? There's no one here in council chambers. And I don't think there's anyone online. So we'll move on to the next, our next topic, which is the BCIU Stormwater Management Project on Center Avenue, which we discussed a bit. We discussed a bit at our regular meeting last month. And so I believe there were some meetings taking place and some decisions were made.
Thank you. As per conversation and the recommendation of the Planning Commission, the Planning Office was able to send out a letter highlighting the recommendations that the Planning Commission provided from the last meeting. Michelle, you can continue from there.
Yes, so as a follow-up to the meeting, their consultant reached out to me. We went back and forth with emails in conjunction with Muhlenberg Township, and the ultimate outcome is Muhlenberg is going to oversee the inspection, and they're doing that as part of the building permit process. And the city is going to do the stormwater management. So the stormwater management agreement will be with us. Muhlenberg will be a party to allow us to enter into their jurisdiction and do that enforcement. So that's where we are. Do we need a waiver, to consider a waiver of land development next month in consideration of the stormwater management agreement?
Yes, and it'd be also helpful to get acknowledgement that the Muhlenberg Township engineer will send us inspection reports. So we have those for the record.
The construction reports?
Yeah.
Okay.
As they're being built. The thing that we're most concerned about, I think, is sinkhole development.
And as-built, we want as-built.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's where that project is. So next week we can consider a waiver condition on those items, and in the interim, I'll reach out to Muhlenberg.
Okay, yeah, that should make things easy, that everyone knows what their job is on this project. Once again, I think we most often have to do cooperative agreements with Muhlenberg versus any other municipality around us. So it's always nice to be able to work with them. Okay, next up is the Reading Redevelopment Authority Reuse Recommendation Resolution, which is right here. I only have one comment, but Sarah, did anyone want to summarize this thing?
So the main changes were just making sure that this only covers single family homes at the moment. This won't this won't this blanket resolution wouldn't cover any buildings that have been shown to be multifamily or commercial or multi-use. It's just going to be for those buildings that are one-family dwellings. Michelle did provide me some comments with some of just the wording and stuff, and I kind of went through, and I've made some notes for myself just to make sure that it matches the wording that we use in the zoning ordinance. So just making sure that everything kind of aligns and we're not trying to figure out, what this term means in this context or in the next. But that's basically it. I had given them the comments from last time and they revised accordingly.
Yeah, the only thing I saw that single family is not specifically spelled out here. It just says residential. Residential dwelling purposes.
Yeah, those were part of my notes where, and if there is any mention about residential or single family, I was going to recommend that they just say one family dwelling because that's how it's in the zoning ordinance. It's either, and then, we distinguish the different types of one family dwelling, either attached, detached, semi-detached. I don't think that designation is necessary because even though most of them may be row homes, some of them may be, semi-detached or fully detached at this point, depending on previous demolitions in that area. So I think just whatever reference to the use is just a one-family dwelling, and that way it's consistent with everything else and how we kind of describe everything in general with zoning and planning and such.
And my only other clarification, that's one thing that I talked about as well, is that this can't be rental. This has to be owner occupied. I don't know why the RRA would want to take a property, take it through eminent domain.
Your mic.
I don't know why the RRA would want to take a property and then let somebody buy it and rent it. I don't think it should be a rental use. I think it should be an owner occupied use.
So zoning doesn't distinguish between it being rented or owner occupied, just that it's only a single family, one family dwelling.
I would just take the rental language out, resolution. I would take the rental language out of the resolution, just so we're not encouraging that. Yeah, because this isn't a zoning issue, this is a redevelopment issue, so.
So just so that we're not kind of encouraging flips, we want this to become someone's home.
Yeah,
Okay.
typically we see it habitat, that type of thing, so.
Are we saying that we want to preclude rental use or just not encourage, not?
I think it's more not encourage it, but I think under these circumstances where it's a reuse, the redevelopment authority's taking them, I think it's something we should focus on because we see so many of these properties get into these hands, they're not taken care of, they're supposed to be rentals, then we get into the whole rental process. So I think it's just encouraging owner occupied for this purpose. And it also said owner occupied rental, and like, it can't really be owner occupied rental if it's a single family, so.
Do the other commissioners have any comments on this zoning amendment?
This isn't a zoning amendment per se. This is just a letter where we are an auto.
Yeah, it would be a blanket resolution,
Yeah.
that after staff review, if it falls under,
It meets the criteria, it's automatically recommended.
yep,
for-
instead of having to come in front of
Right.
the
Yeah.
commission.
Right. Yeah, no, as I said before, I would broaden it personally, but that's fine, have a starting point like this.
Yeah, I think with most of the things that do come before the Blighted Property Review Board. This covers quite a few of the things that come before.
Yeah,
Before
yeah,
that.
there's certainly quite a few multi-unit conversions, legal or illegal. And there's a fair number of industrial, commercial properties. But yeah, we'll take them as they come. This is an easy one to just auto recommend.
I would just suggest, Mr. Chairman, this as well, that if the council passes this resolution, that the planning commission then by a motion and for a resolution, specifically designate somebody on staff. And we can always update that as needed whenever is necessary, so that so that's on the record who is the designee, and especially for those times like if we have to miss a meeting for snow or something within that 30-day period.
Well, again, this isn't getting approved by city council, right? This is just a planning commission resolution that would auto recommend. That's all it is. So we agree to it here or in a voting meeting and that's it.
Yeah, that's correct. That's just so that they're not coming. Yes.
This is not a zoning change. This is not an ordinance. This is just a resolution for the planning commission.
Correct. For the recommended reuse of the properties when the RRA goes to take them. That's all this. If their desire is to take what were single family homes and turn them back into single family homes, you're just saying, we agree, please move forward without them having to come to meetings or wait any time.
And when we say our staff takes lead, it means this decision can be made at the staff level without this coming over to the planning commission.
Right.
And so we would basically give them an approval letter under resolution, whatever 2026. This is the recommend. Then we could attach then a copy of the resolution with the approval letter, just letting them know that that property at that parcel received the recommendation from the planning commission under this resolution.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is at least a start of what David was looking for to keep the process moving without having to wait,
Sure. Yeah.
whatever, a few weeks for our meeting.
Yeah, and David Barr agreed with Michelle's comments about starting with single family homes first and then seeing, maybe expanding it in the future.
Okay, great.
Will this be on the agenda to vote on at the next meeting?
Next week.
Next week, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll pass along the comments, and if they're able to provide something revised in time for next week's meeting, then it'll be on the agenda. If not, then we'll have to wait until we get that revised version to vote on, but hopefully it won't be too much of a change for them to be able to provide it for next week.
Okay, that sounds great. Any other comments on the reuse recommendation resolution?
Yeah, and I agree with everything that was said. I'm just saying that under section 4C, it says the planning commission may, by action of the commission or through such staff or officers the commission designates. I'm just trying to say we have to make sure to designate somebody officially, I believe, if we pass this resolution.
We can do that as part of approving the resolution, just stating for the minutes that we appoint the planning commission staff.
Very well.
Okay, great. Next up, we have taken a look at some saldo amendments. I would like to start off with the easy one. sections 515, 303, 304, and 307, which are details on what developers have to submit to the city for each type of plan. And basically it's getting rid of the multiple copies of things.
Yeah, so the way it's worded now, they, it says 6 currently or 5, or however many we need. But a lot of times developers, they can read the ordinance and so then they just submit everything. And so every once in a while, we'll get someone that will email us before submittal and will say, just give us 1 or 2 copies. But we do still have quite a few that they come in and they have everything, but everything includes 5, 6 copies of the original submission. So this is just, for anyone that is just reading the ordinance and doesn't necessarily check in with the planning office prior to submittal. That way they see that we only need 1. And then we were kind of going back and forth internally about how many copies we should say that we need, but also making sure that we get for the county submittal. And so that's why then I had a standalone sentence there. That way it kind of separates what's the city submission and then the county. The county stuff is separate so that they can see, it's 2 in total, but 1 is for the city, 1 is for the county. This was kind of the way that I was able to kind of word it in a way that didn't leave it for interpretation. But yeah, so that's the easy one. That's just administrative, cleaning things up.
I can provide examples of jurisdiction and like give the jurisdiction. Sorry, I wonder why you're pointing at me. I provided samples that we just did in another jurisdiction and also as well as one that Jerome and I worked in together. And he said it seems to be working. He gets them electronically.
They still will submit a lot of copies sometimes. You'll get that just because of what they do with other municipalities. So
But
it happens.
A lot of municipalities are going electronically.
Yeah, it works out nicely.
Yeah, we are moving towards getting electronic submissions. We're still working out the kinks on that to have people submit it online and stuff. We're just making sure that internal city staff are fully trained on the system before we kind of open that part up to accept things externally.
So from the administrative standpoint, also when it goes to the FTP site, then we can assume that everything has been complete as in terms of the application, the fees have been paid, and then we can move forward.
Yep.
Just to mention at this point, we are trying to go back to cleaning some of the submissions that we have received way back from 1980s all the way, and it is a little bit burdensome with all the kind of submissions we received, and we are now deciding what to do with them, and they are taking up space. So this approach will significantly help the staff in terms of handling paper that we receive often through the submissions.
I believe I know the city's adopted it. Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission has a policy as to how long you have to keep things. So just make sure you're following that. And anything that you're getting rid of, you're doing it in accordance with the policy.
Yeah, so.
Okay, any questions on these changes? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to the next one, which is let me see here. I think these two all go together. We received a letter from the DCED, which here's my copy of the letter. Saying that basically the our ordinance doesn't quite fit the MPC, and it's too burdensome for developers, which I don't know. I didn't think so. And my father was a developer for 50 years. So, but one thing I did point out to David, and it is pointed out here, from the DCED, that if we do make changes, there are certain things, especially sewer modules, that somebody has to take, make sure that it's taken care of, because of, and I don't think it's appropriate for Public Works to do it because they don't handle plants.
So sewer planning modules don't necessarily need a corresponding land development plan. They can just submit the necessary documents to Public Works. Then Public Works provide, once they go through everything and it's adequate, then they're the ones that draft up the resolution for council to approve. And then they provide that resolution with the documents and everything back to the developer, whoever applicant, and then it's their responsibility to send it into the DEP. I have reached out to the manager that does that, Deb Hogue. She's the one that her and Robert Roth, they manage the sewer planning module process. And I have reached out to them to discuss a way to monitor and track that through our electronic system. So we are working through that. We have different avenues of catching it. It's just actually getting that, creating an SOP for it, making sure that everyone knows what the process would be to check on that. Don, do you have anything to add?
The one thing I would add is the purpose of them reviewing the planning modules is to ensure that we have capacity, sewer capacity at our treatment plant, pump stations, sewers. So that's the purpose for why Public Works needs to do this. And so, yeah, that's what I have to add.
Yeah, so in conversation with DCD, we have been using the land development process kind of as a catch-all to make sure that things are getting done. However, then that kind of adds an extra layer for developers. So we're trying to just make sure that the process makes sense, it's as streamlined as possible. And that's what the memo is for. If you had the markups viewable on my document, I put in some comments of what I think we could maybe do. There is some wording in there that came straight from the MPC, so I don't want to necessarily touch that. So under the definition for land development, A2, that is word for word from the MPC. So I don't necessarily want to change that, but I have seen from other municipalities that they would add one or two things under C, under land development does not include. They would add one or two things along with these three that we have that wouldn't qualify, that disqualify as a project from land development. So we have conversions that's only going to be up to a 2-family and things like that. We could add something that says only internal improvements. So if they take an old warehouse, they're not necessarily making an addition, they're not demolishing anything, they're not creating impervious cover. Like, let's just pretend it's the perfect parcel and all they're doing is stuff on the inside. It wouldn't qualify, it would disqualify as a land development plan. They still have to do everything else. They still need to get their sewer planning modules. They would still need to submit for building permits, which during that review, they're reviewed for fire suppression and safety and all of that. So those are just some of my comments. Changing, what could qualify as a waiver for land development. So just increasing that threshold from 800 to 1,000 square feet. Just minor things like that. There was also, and I had made the suggestion, I don't know if this is something that we'd necessarily be able to do. It probably warrants another conversation internally, but we could create kind of another level of plans that staff can review and then determine, that it doesn't necessarily have to be recorded, but it's a plan that staff reviews and that we can review for certain things. We can list out what that criteria is. So that was just another option. I named it a detailed site plan. That's just something that I had come across when at the previous municipality in Texas that I worked in. It was just another type of plan that had certain information on it. And so that way it doesn't necessarily have to come to the planning commission, but it still gets staff review and our quote unquote approval. And it'd be a little bit more in depth than just what they provide to the zoning office. So those are just some suggestions, some comments. And then I'm open to any other suggestions and comments.
Yeah, the other thing that I was thinking of was trash and recycling, because 601 Penn Street,
They requested a waiver and that there was this issue, right, that you brought up with trash.
Yeah.
Accessibility to containers and where they're going to put them and get to.
Yeah. So
Approximately 5 years ago, we did get into this discussion quite a bit. And it was something that we were attempting to emphasize was beautification efforts. And with that was curbs, sidewalks, driveway ramps, landscaping, buffer yards, lighting, condition of the sewer system, condition of the stormwater system, all things that we do a checks on. That would no longer be completed.
I did notice in the letter, though, on because they do talk about an administrative approval of plans in here, but on page 4, specific comments on the minor development criteria. Our definition says the project does not involve any new street or road or the extension of municipal facilities. And they suggest consider including any changes to parking or traffic circulation, which is one thing that we considered on 601 Penn Street when we asked them to get more 15-minute parking spaces. So they are, giving us some leeway here. But once again, that's one of those things where if we do this administrative thing, now that we have a staff, because for years we didn't have a staff, now we have a staff that that can be easily checked.
Yeah, and that for things, if we don't want necessarily to not have them do anything, again, there is that option of creating some version of a land development plan that planning staff, or if we have consultants to assist us to do the review, they will get approved by the planning office. They wouldn't necessarily get recorded though. So because I think from what Michelle was telling me, if we want them to record these plans, then they would need your guys' approval, because then you need to sign off on them. So these plans that would be administratively reviewed, they would get approved by staff, like how a zoning permit is approved by staff, but these are reviewed using the SALDO requirements. So they're still getting reviewed by staff for the necessary things. They just wouldn't necessarily come in front of the planning commission, but we would still provide a report to the planning commission of different things that we've reviewed. So again, these are just options. It's a bigger conversation, but just to kind of get it started.
So what is the problem, the perceived problem anyway, that we're trying to solve?
Mostly for adaptive reuse, that they don't have necessarily any external changes to the footprint. So whether it's demolition or building onto it,
The
if it's
site
just
building remains the same.
the
just
building
interior
footprint remains the
changes.
same, everything remains pretty much the same, other than the interior division to create the apartments.
Okay.
I think that that was one of the major point of discussion, and David strongly highlighted that concern because in our current ordinances, that is a criteria we use to assess minor land development. And some of the developers often push us back because they look at that sometimes as a zoning function, but at the same time, they do not find a way of justifying that actually that is a land development, role and responsibility. So we have had quite a number of discussions, and Michelle has been very supportive. There was one project which was, I think, on Lancaster Avenue, L200 or something. He strongly pushed back when we talked about minor land development, and that is part of the reasons why these conversations were triggered, because of the pushback we have been getting.
So apart from the delay in the process, in other words, submitting and getting on the calendar and having it being reviewed and discussed and voted on. So, and that might be, optimally 1 month, but it could likely be 2 or 3 months, right? So there's a time element there, but all of the things that get considered here, would they be, if we didn't do those reviews, but they got, would they be captured elsewhere anyway?
Yeah, so if after, whatever we reword it, however we reword it, if a project doesn't get any planning, it's still going to be captured elsewhere. So sewer, if they're going to be increasing dwelling units, the zoning office, planning, other departments know they need to verify with Public Works. I always defer to Deb Hogue and Robert Roth just to verify if they're going to need sewer planning modules. We also have been encouraging a lot of, the one-stops. A lot more people are taking advantage of that. So that way they know ahead of time that they're going to have this other process. Parking and loading and all of that, that is part of the zoning ordinance. So that does get reviewed through the zoning office. And so if it doesn't comply, they would have to go in front of the zoning hearing board. So there is oversight for if they don't comply with those sections of the zoning ordinance.
But zoning only looks at the number. It doesn't look at the layout.
Yes.
Right. So that's really the question is, there are things that get reviewed and analyzed here. And if we didn't do them, where would they get done? And I think they need to be done, at least. I do care about the landscaping. I do care about the parking design.
May I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm not used to DCED commenting on a process like this. Did we ask them for like suggested improvements, or did somebody complain to them?
No, so the city of Reading is working with the DCED. They're providing assistance to us, like a technical assistance. And so David Barr is the one that then kind of directs them on what we need assistance on. And so we have been receiving these kind of complaints and grievances. And so David Barr asked them to just review it and give their insight. This isn't meant to be kind of like a legal thing or anything. It's more just, this is what we've seen in other municipalities. This is kind of like our suggestions for you to look into on possible changes to your ordinance to address these complaints that you've been receiving. So we asked them to provide us with this guidance.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a couple concerns, and we talked about this a little bit. There was one you sent me, Lancaster, Allentown, that I was pretty comfortable with, but what if they don't comply? What's the waiver process? do they have to come get a land development and apply for land, then ask for a waiver? Well, that's almost ridiculous if they're just asking for a waiver from a saldo and have to go through the land development to do that. So why not just come through land development? Regarding waivers, why can't they come in and either ask for a waiver of land development or just do a sketch plan of record, which would basically be what they're submitting to zoning? And that gives us an historic thing at the recorder of deeds. I have a concern, and 601 Penn and Lancaster, these are all situations. Another one we were talking about before the meeting, or I was talking about the chair about, is that having something in the recorder of deeds to show what this property has been used for and having that historic knowledge, I just think is beneficial. That's where people are going to start. I think it's better now, but historically, some of the city record keeping has not been the best. So having that, so I think there's a medium ground we could find, but I think we need to make sure that the concerns are, because unfortunately, we're not developing farmland. We're developing, and we need to make sure that the EDUs are there, the traffic is there, the parking is there.
Plus, we have the internal division of space, which is then leased out to other users. We've had several of those where that division of space needs to be recorded.
So that, again, that was kind of where I had put my comments, that we can put in an exclusion that if it's just the internal division, it wouldn't necessarily have to go through the formal land development phase. Even the county has expressed, like they don't review those. Every time that we send them something that is just the internal division, they come back and tell us does not need review. So that's their opinion as well. So, like Michelle said, there's ways to kind of meet in the middle between, necessarily what developers want and what the guidance has kind of given us, what different options for that different municipalities do, and what would work for us.
Yeah. Well, let's say that we weren't reviewing the interior of the building when the building was going to be reconfigured. Who would review it then?
Well, they would still need building permits. So, in the building and trades department, they would still review all of those permits. All of those plans need to be stamped and sealed. The fire marshal also reviews those plans, and they review for all of the fire requirements with suppression and safety and divisions and all of that and separations. So all of that internal stuff will still get viewed by city staff through a formal permitting process through building and trades and fire.
Would they review the parking design, for example, if the building use changes, the number of people living, working, and building changes?
Like the occupancy?
What would they do with regard to parking in the zoning process?
So the parking would be through zoning. So they would look at the layout. We do, in the parking and loading ordinance, there are standards for certain design standards. So the aisle, drive aisle widths, the size of the parking, the number of ADA van accessible.
Site and all that sort of stuff.
I'm sorry?
The line of sight and all that.
Site triangle,
So,
yes.
Yeah.
That's in there.
But who reviews it? But you're saying that at the zoning stage, it gets that they're looking at a design.
Mm-hmm. At the design and the number.
Yeah.
Then, depending on, if it's in the CC district and it's a multi-use building, they're not counting parking for the commercial, but they tell you what the minimum is for the residential. And then if you meet that minimum and your design meets the criteria.
So when we're sitting and looking at the site triangle, deciding whether it's sufficient, somebody has already done that already.
Yes.
If I may, you're actually touching on some engineering issues. I mean, there's some of these things that non-engineers can handle, but there are some other things that I do believe that city engineer should be involved.
Okay, but there is a zoning office, right? There's zoning staff. I know Olson was part of it, but has since left again.
We have Shannon now sitting in that position.
Oh, Shannon Kalori, yes. Okay. Now, is she reviewing site triangles?
She's not an engineer.
She's not an engineer.
So for the and again, this could be something that as we discuss it, we can determine how these things are. There are regulations for it. A lot of these, the location of the, like, if there is a new even driveway cut, there are standards. They have to be so many feet away from the curb, and then from the corner, there's a minimum distance. And then once they get built, those that yellow is Public Works, and they would paint them at whatever the standard is my understanding.
You know, the way I see it is when you do a project, regardless of what it is, there's n number of topics that come into play that require analysis and review and acceptance. And we're just divvying them up between organizations, zoning, planning, permitting, and these guys do this, those guys do that, and we over here do this. You know, we can rearrange the deck, but it's still the same set of cards.
But again, we're mostly looking at something that they're not creating a new parking lot, a new driveway cut and all of that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't necessarily qualify for a waiver or something like that. Like that would still be a land development that would still get reviewed. The main focus of this is to streamline the process for something where the building exists, the parking lot exists, they're just changing the interior.
Yeah, streamline, remove redundancies where there's two entities performing this task. So yeah, and the whole thing just needs to work reliably. That's all. You know, that the concerns get caught, the designs get adjusted.
Yeah.
You know, the developer doesn't escape, you know, the required expectation. Also at the same time that nobody stipulates something in excess of what is required minimally, which I got stuck with $10,000 worth of E&S requirements when I was disturbing less than the minimum.
Anything that would trigger an E&S plan would automatically triggers a land development plan.
Yeah, well,
they have a pretty high threshold.
Things get decided upon that are not necessary as well. So, but I'm not trying to make an issue here out of my stuff, but I'm just saying that there's just all of these topics that need to get addressed. How do we divide the labor for this thing?
According to our 2025 report, I think we had about 6, 7, or 8 waivers that were granted to persons who came in and felt that land development plan wasn't justified. For the most part, if the applicant hires a competent engineer or surveyor to draw the plan, in which they're going to need anyway, they're out in 60 days.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, I've heard these comments too. I think, you know, part of the complaint is simply that they don't want to spend the money to a plan, hire an architect to do a plan, right? That they want to escape that and just put it on a napkin and say, this is what I'm going to do. And which means it's not reviewable, right? You don't know exactly what they're building. So you can't. But I think that's a significant part of the complaint is just they're not willing to do what is essentially the bare minimum, which is to have a plan of sufficient detail that you can do it.
But if they're doing these major internal changes, they're going to have to have an architect anyway for the building office. So having this architect throw on, I understand.
Yeah.
But what people don't understand is you're going to do this anyway. So show me where the driveway is, show where this is. And we're not,
I don't disagree with that. I've studied paper napkins in this bladed property review committee, and it's not very satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing about this, of course, is that when you're doing certain types of renovations, like Fourth and Buttonwood, the the one that they were just about ready to open, and then the car slammed in and crushed the corner of the building. There's like what you said, it's like the paper napkin thing. I drove past the building one day a few years ago, about 2 years ago, I guess. And I looked at it, I looked at the rafters and I went, there's no possible way those rafters are code. No possible way. So I called up building department, they put a stop work order on it right away because because as part of the ICC code, if you're replacing rafters, you need architecturally signed plans.
Right.
It's a lot different than when I was 8 years old. My father and I used to go out. My father and I used to go out with my mother, and we would mark all the rafters, and cut them the day before the guys would put them together. And that's not allowed anymore.
But I mean, that's a perfect example where that wouldn't necessarily be covered in Saldo. That is a building and trades thing that they would oversee. And especially now they're better staffed now than they were previously. And they work very closely with the fire marshal to make sure they have their certificates of occupancy, which means these signed and sealed plans and being reviewed and being inspected through their department, meaning building and trades and fire.
Yeah. And the one thing that I pointed out to David, and I don't know if he checked up on it, but when I opened my business, and this is a good point because staffing was a major problem when I opened my business. Oh God, when was it? 2016? I had a 1-page plan for to be reviewed by buildings and trades. And I submitted the plan. I forget offhand if it was 60 or 90 days they required to review the plan. I was like, it's a 1-page plan. Why are you 90 days to review a 1-page plan? Well, part of it was staffing, of course. But the other, the other excuse they gave was that because of Act 47, they're allowed 90 days. Well, we do reviews here. Quicker than that. Now, I'm sure it's gotten much better because 2016 was, pretty bad time for the city. But it's like they're already, buildings and trades already get 60 days to do a review. If they submit the same paperwork to us, we could do it at the same time. It doesn't make it in many ways doesn't make sense to me.
There's one other thing too, is the responsibility of the municipality to ensure that a plan has been developed in accordance with its rules and regulations. One thing that Tim Kroll had brought to my attention when I first started was the amount of lawsuits that were involved with previous projects. And he said, there's no way to circumvent that. You just got to make sure everything's covered. And the best way of covering that is by having a plan drawn to scale, showing what they're going to do, and also what the basic requirements are for them. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
And I'd like to put that in other words. I view our job is to make sure that the applicant is performing the necessary due diligence for what they're proposing. There might be some things that come in that are simple enough where an engineer and architect aren't needed. But there are other things, especially if you're trying to avoid lawsuits, you need to make sure that they're doing their due diligence like they should. And it takes a certain amount of judgment, but that'll keep you out of lawsuits. It'll keep the city out of the lawsuits anyway.
What was the nature of the lawsuits?
Oh, they were things that dealt with the driveway locations. I know Tim and I, we were looking at the Fourth and Elm for the supernatural. That's where he brought it up. And we provided them an option with utilizing a man to direct traffic coming out of, is it church? I can't think of the back street. But anyway, that's where you mentioned it, that we've got to make sure that we have points of ingress and egress that can function properly. If the area is going to be striped with yellow paint, it's got to go through city council. City council's got to adopt an ordinance in order to create a no parking zone. So there's a lot of factors that you have to cross everything off, make sure it's been completed.
I'm just
So
curious.
he just forewarned me. He said there's going to be problems and be prepared.
Well, I'm just trying to understand the nature of the suits. Is this the owner or developer suing the city or or who's suing who?
I haven't been sued personally since I've been here.
It could be a personal injury suit that they could come back and try to say the city, right, wrong, or indifferent. We'd still have to defend.
Yes. All right, so
Yeah.
a design issue that the city allowed or
Mhm.
somebody would claim caused them injury. All right, I got it.
Well,
Well, I'm
that's where you need to get the seal and signature on the plan so that they're taking responsibility for what they do.
Yeah, right.
And I can say, I'm not familiar with lawsuits in municipal government. Okay, so what we're talking about is not normal, and there's definitely a solution here.
Yeah, honestly, I am open to, rethinking, the responsibilities here of the planning commission. But as I said, we're just shifting responsibilities, right? So it has to be clear that if we take something off of our plate in order to conform, this is the argument, right? That we don't conform to what is typical. But if we shift responsibility off of our plate, it's got to go to somebody else's plate. It has to be clear that whoever that else is prepared to deal with it and can do it effectively.
And that's ultimately what we want. Like, we're not going to eliminate something and then not have something to kind of replace it, the intent and the power behind it is still the same with, maybe just removing a small layer of difficulty or an obstacle that, a perceived obstacle. So
Susan-
again, this is just the beginning. We're trying to see what we can do in order to make the process more business friendly, developer friendly.
Whenever there's, some process that works well, it tends to attract additional responsibility. When it's in a sea of other processes that maybe don't work so well, right? And say, well, let's just move it here and it'll get taken care of. And I don't know what the history has been over many years, but from what I see, this does work pretty well.
I'm going to piggyback on that. We represent a lot of municipalities, and yes, it is a different type of development than what you see with the city. But I will say the city is one of the seamless projects that I'm involved with.
Yeah.
It works better. You spoke about lawsuits and things like that. The other thing to consider in this is a public meeting. We publish an agenda. If there is something going on, the neighbors, it's not like zoning where it's actually mailed out and things like that, or East Coventry where they put a big picture on the property. But this is a public agenda, and that provides the neighbors to have the opportunity to come in and to speak if they see an issue with something, and they would not have that at a staff level. As we talk through this and based on comments, I'm thinking maybe a committee, we take some of the projects, lay them out and see how they would look through the different processes that we're speaking of.
One thing I would like to say is the basis of this conversation with DCED and the approach that they used to come in was to basically provide advisory support. They're simply advising us as a city to look at our processes and look at our ordinances in relation to doing business. I think it is within the power of this commission, and especially on the desk of the solicitor, to provide a directive of how or what we should consider in relation to how we are working with the current developers and how the city is moving on. So I would agree with the proposal of us going back to sit down and look at some of these recommendations and changes to make sure that whatever we generate makes sense and is going to support us to make the process much more smoother.
I look at this as something that the city needs to sit and get their arms around. If the idea is that, through some restructuring, reorganizing of how duties and responsibilities and drawing more distinct boundaries, and that proposal should come from the city, and I'm happy to adjust the boundaries. I just need to be comfortable that everything's getting covered somehow, that all these topics are getting addressed. But somebody, if we're not going to look at site triangles, somebody else is, right? That sort of thing. And
there's more. I mean, I can look at site triangles. Jerome can look at site triangles. I'm not trying to take work away from Jerome, but there's more than one process to achieve that goal. And just for the record, I'm totally in support of a business friendly process. And I do think that, we definitely can be successful, and there's more than one way to do it.
Yeah. But in my mind, we should be clear about who owns site triangles, right? And say, okay, you're it, and we don't talk about it anymore, right? And that sort of thing. And there's a litany of hundreds of topics here, literally, that need to get addressed.
Well, I jumped in and said I'm responsible for site triangles unless Jerome wants to take site triangles.
Okay, you're it.
You're it. It's one of us.
And then,
Go ahead.
Oh, I will.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, besides, looking at making sure everything is being reviewed in some way, shape, or form, whether it be here or some other city staff. In the section 515-312, the wording of that for the payment of fees conflicts with the fee schedule, and it's confusing. We have a set fee for plans that qualify under a plan exempted from standard procedure. However, the actual ordinance dictates something different. And so it's revisiting whether we want to keep that fee, remove that fee, and go and keep the wording. So it's also taking a look at that, because there are some conflicts there that, if I were to leave and no one could find the SOPs on our drive, what do we do? And if their only reference is the fee schedule and this ordinance, well, what do we do?
Yeah, well, it's an excellent point, because, you guys have now more staff than you've had in the past, from what I understand. And, what happens, 4 years from now? Is it go back to zero? Or, this board, this commission persists. And as far as I can see, for the 4 years I've been here, has had regular members and regular attendance, and, good consulting. And we, I think, do the job. There's been a turnover of people in your position. What can we rely on? If we were to pass something off and say, okay, this is now yours, and you disappear, now what happens? Right.
Yeah, and a lot of these ordinance amendments it's also coinciding with internal, staff, not just with planning, but other departments, is making sure we have the system and then writing the system down. That way, if something were to happen where
Yeah.
all of the staff that's currently here is no longer here, and it's a whole brand new staff. It may take them a little bit longer, but they have, the process has been written down. And, instead of just kind of finding bits and pieces in our drive of different people's notes of what's been going
Right.
on.
And you'll appreciate this in 2022. It was just me and Emily.
Yes. To put in perspective, I have the most seniority in the planning office with 4.5 years with the city in total.
Right.
And I've only been officially with the planning office since October.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're taking advantage of our staffing being a little bit more level now, and making sure, we're able to look at our processes, where can we improve them? And then as we improve it, we're making sure that line of communication is open with the rest of the other departments within the city, and just making sure that process is written down in a way that everyone can find it. Doesn't matter who's here.
I think you can also have some redundancy. If staff, can't handle something, you can have a backup plan where there's a consultant or vice versa. So, I think you can protect yourself with what's being proposed.
Mhm.
You had a comment, Will?
Yes, thank you. A few questions and comments. Question for our planning consultant. You mentioned the number of land development waivers that we approved in the annual report, which by the way got a lot of good publicity. That was great. For the record, how many waivers did we decline?
I don't think any.
I don't think we did either. Exactly. Right.
Oh.
And thank you. And it was a good point to raise that, about the waivers. I think some of the resentment that we get from either land developers or other business owners, it's not from over enforcement, it's from non-enforcement of other people who scoff at the city's ordinances. And when we have to do the city, not the planning commission, they do cease and desist orders and they pay a fine and they continue to do what they're doing. That's a broader problem than just our purview. It's the other half of this that needs to be brought up and focused on from time to time. Certainly, Mr. Chairman, you made a great point. We didn't have staff to delegate anything and defer to before. It was also, we were encountering, and this is a good problem we have in the city. We have a lot of redevelopment. A lot of what we do, as has been said before, is redevelopment. And we were encountering large redevelopment projects that as far as the footprint didn't change, it did not meet our criteria for land development, but there were changes to that set of things that is in the planning commission's purview, like landscaping, lighting, and so on. And that's where some of this came, where the recommendation was made that we can take a look. Of course, I'm glad the DCED acknowledges the importance of the sewer part, because obviously, as we know, we are under a federal consent decree. We have to comply with the federal regulations and all that. But it is also this redevelopment, which we're experiencing a lot of. And I thought Commissioner Rice's line of questioning was right on. But there is a certain set of things which are exclusive for planning, so that cannot fall through the cracks and will not be taken up by somebody else. That is for the review here. So I've been starting to think about this idea and this model being proposed to make it like zoning, and I could see how that could work, and we'll see how the staff develops that, as they always do, in a reasonable way. But I'm thinking that was a good point there that our solicitor made about public notice. I suppose we could build something into it, an ordinance where there would be public notice for a project. We'd have to think about that. And the other question I've had is, have you thought, if we're going to take zoning as a model, would staff decisions then be appealable to the commission?
Will, there were 7 waivers granted for land development and 1 was denied.
And if that one, I was thinking we denied one because it turns out it needed a full development, right?
It was 601 Penn.
Oh, there we go. Right. Which the chairman brought up earlier. Right. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think, are there any more comments from the commissioners on this topic for the moment?
But let's, well, I think this needs further discussion, further consideration. What would the next steps be? And, I would encourage the city to come up with a strategy and bring it to us and let us consider it.
I'm thinking a committee, and I think we need to have the administration needs to have some type of conversation with council to see at least if they're initially on board, because I wouldn't want to go through drafting and all this time and doing changes and then get to council and be like, nope, we like the way things work.
Yeah, I don't have official response from council, but I have talked to a few of them about this, and the difficulty that the perception of difficulty. We can all argue whether it's real or not. And I think that everybody that I've talked to is interested in an easier process to have a perception be that it's never going to be easy, right? People are going to be forced into doing legitimate designs to scale with sufficient detail that anybody can understand it, that you could even get a permit from it,
My other, and I'll just say this, my only other concern is making sure it's getting done. And not from the staff level. I think the staff does a great job and does the review and things, but how many things, I mean, we can't get people to record plans. We can't get people to pay. So my concern would be somehow this might get lost in the shuffle somehow.
Yeah. Well, I would make an observation that even though you guys probably know the internal processes really well, I don't, and the public knows it less well than I do. So, all of the steps that you go through, to get from, your plan to permitted construction is not very clear to most people. In fact, I would.
And we actually have our program manager in CD, Tony. He's been working with Alvernia students to kind of create some sort of like a flow chart kind of thing to help the public, to make it public facing, so that way people can kind of go and see, okay, if I do this, then I need this, and I go here. It is in progress. It hasn't been completed yet, but we're working on it.
Good. Yeah. So I will always agree that having a simpler process that we can explain easily, or that people can refer to themselves and understand it themselves, is always a good thing.
Just something slightly different from that. At one point, I know, especially at staffing level, we were discussing about the feasibility of starting to charge for waiver application processes. I was looking at some other municipalities. I think some of them charges for that, and they're able to put their fee towards the process. I don't think we do that. I don't know if it is something we should consider, or.
I think that might be the quick fix in the interim. Is Jerome had put together a packet that I think we used for the Lancaster Avenue project. It's a waiver application, and then just doing a small fee for that. That way you're covering Jerome's costs for reviewing it. And that way, at least in the interim, that's a way for people in a quick evaluation to get done if the waiver is appropriate or not.
That's it.
Okay, very good. Well, we will, return to this, process once the staff works a little bit more on this and has some more research, and I think DCED is still here for a little while under our grant.
We still have access to their technical assistance for a few months, I believe.
Yeah.
And so we do have, there should be a meeting upcoming where we can kind of let them know, your comments on this and what we've kind of discussed, and kind of just give them an update and see if maybe they can give us either more guidance or just letting them know, we are taking it, under advisement and are going to try to work some of these things in. But yeah, we do have access to their assistance for a few months at least.
Yeah.
But
No,
Mr. Chair, briefly, would you want something presented to the commission in a formal format, either at next month's workshop or on Tuesday, regarding the first part of the amendments regarding plan submission?
Yeah, because that part is ready. So we could, I just have to put it in bill form, but, and actually I would have to send this to, I haven't sent this to the county yet, so.
I think I would have initially this commission bless it, even if it's not a formal review, before you send it to the county.
Okay, that's fine.
And then we can do our review as well. That way we're not back and forth with the county.
Okay.
Okay, we can next week do a recommendation of the sections about how many copies are required of a plan. Do a recommendation to send it to the county for review. Okay, next up, do we have any reports or updates?
The only update that we have on the report is last month, the Planning Commission made a recommendation of the annual report, which was written. A copy was shared with the city clerk and the rest of the team. David received it and he was able to submit to the press, and we were able to have a press release of the report which came out. Some of the council members who looked at the report, they were very impressed, and they said the Planning Commission has done a very good job, and they were very excited. This went all the way to the mayor, and I do not have a lot of details, but I think the mayor will be interested to talk about it at one point, but that is at David's level. I cannot speak in detail, but everyone was excited about the Planning Commission's work and how detailed the commission is, especially in regards to land development and the processes that are related. Yeah.
Well, it's quite a few years now of determined effort by quite a few people, including Jerome. Because when Jerome first got here, as I remember, it was a mess. And Jerome's, how many years are you here now, Jerome?
6.
6, that's what I thought. So, it's been a lot of determined effort, with Emily jumping back and forth, having 2 hats for quite a while, also for 4 years. Really, it just goes to show you the determination of the people who show up every month for these meetings, and the staff who supports us in this. I don't see anyone here for public comment.
I just have one tiny bit of information. Blighted Property Review Committee. Thank you. Blighted Property Review Committee has revised its calendar, and it now meets it has 2 cycles a year instead of 3 cycles a year. So there's sort of queuing it up to have fewer, longer meetings. For what that's worth. There you have it.
Yeah, well, the first blighted property meeting took 4 hours, 5 hours?
It was long. Time I will never get back.
We were, yeah, we were, we were learning as we were going there, but after a
That, by the
while,
way, is also working, I think well, doing what it's supposed to do. And
Yeah, the public's coming out more for them.
yeah, they can get long, but board committee member attendance is good and regular, and we've not had any quorum issues. We did my first meeting on the committee we didn't have a quorum, but since then we've had a reliable quorum, so it's working.
A quick update, the city council has held their hearing for the TOD, as well as the parking and loading. Those hearings were concluded, and city council will be considering both of those at future meetings. Just to let you know also that there was some opposition with parking with regards to the parking facilities within the CC zoning district that are to be owned, maintained by the city of Reading, the Reading Parking Authority, or any agency of the city or Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. There was some opposition with that.
which is strange because that's been in the zoning ordinance since I've been here. So, in fact, we had a discussion with, they were doing changes at the Gateway building. And they were changing the parking. And I was like, you're changing the parking, that now falls under the redevelopment authority because you're in the CC district. And at that time, the parking authority didn't want to deal with it. So they let them have they had let them have the private parking. Yeah, which I tried to explain to them, that's not the way it works. The ordinance says you have to take care of it, but they did not see it that way.
Very quickly, I am pleased to report that Castlewood is moving forward. There will be a hearing, I think, in front of council on the 29th for the petition to be, for them to accept dedication. And you will have for your consideration on Tuesday night a resolution recommending council accept the properties or accept the streets. So, and I think, Jeremiah, am I correct? Castlewood would have to come back here for reaffirmation.
Yes, I believe so, because of it would be recorded.
Okay, we can take care of that on Tuesday. As I was telling Simon when at the last meeting, I went into the office to sign all the stormwater agreements. Must have been 50 or 60 of them. Yeah. I think this process has taken 12 years from when Phil Rabina brought it up the first time to me. So, there's another thing where, the Glen Road turns out was never on the topographic map. And therefore the dedication of Kings Way and Queens Court and all of that would have happened. It wouldn't have connected to a road on the topographic map. So it wouldn't have worked. So there was a few months delay just getting that fixed. And that was something that should have happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So, but once again, the the staff of Public Works does a really good job at trying to track down the historical nature of these things. So, very good. Any comments from anyone? Okay, our next regular meeting will be Tuesday, June 23rd here in council chambers at 6 p.m. And then our next workshop meeting will be July 21st, 2026 at 6 p.m. here in council chambers. I hope that the sound is working very well for everyone who's connecting virtually.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
So, and it's actually, temperature is quite pleasant in here. The,
Outside too.
It was very warm in the third floor conference room.
the, because that was one of the things that I did complain about was that in the winter in here, it can be an icebox. And they seem to have fixed that problem. So lots of work happening here at City Hall to make things better for us all. Okay, with that, I believe we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and having these discussions because the staff now has some ideas to go on.
Very
Thank
good
you.
discussion.
Okay, good night.
Good night.